your name and location, that would be great. Also, if you would like for everyone in the room to see your chat, please make sure you've selected all panelists and attendees in the blue drop-down box that's located at the bottom of the chat area. We'll get started in about 3 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to welcome you this afternoon to this webinar session, and we'll get started in about 1 minute.
Okay, and Melissa, I have 1 o'clock. I just wanted to say hello and welcome everyone to our session this afternoon entitled Making the Shift from Face-to-Face to Online. How do I communicate effectively and maintain positive relationships with students? Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, I'm Amber Parker. I'm Director of Outreach and Support at NCVirtual, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. So we have just a few housekeeping tips before we start. If Lori, if you'll advance your slide. Okay, so we do have a chat feature, and if you'll look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat icon. If you click that, the chat window will open. And as we've stated a couple of times, in order for everyone to see your introductions and questions, please click the blue drop-down menu at the bottom of the chat and select the All Panelists and Attendees option. Please feel free to add in the chat where you are and where you're from and what you teach. You're also welcome to add any questions in the chat. I'll be watching for trending questions, and we'll pause a couple of times during the presentation to address those questions. And then we'll follow up with a Q&A session at the end of the presentation as well. We will also post the recorded version of this session on our digital transitions page. If somebody will drop that link in the chat. Usually have that up for you within a couple of days. And that page will also include archived recordings of our previous sessions and our registration links for future sessions, including some follow-up hours with our presenters. The recordings also will include the chat transcript. And then lastly, a certificate for 1 hour of attendance toward your CEUs will be emailed to all registered participants within about 1 week from the session date. So with all that, at this time, it's my pleasure to turn it over to our presenter, Lori Sloan.
Hello, everyone. Amber, thank you so much. Thank you all for all the help I have in here. I'm going to be spoiled. I've never done a presentation where I have people that can watch my chat and take care of everything. I won't want to go back to teaching my live classes without somebody in there. You're spoiling me rotten. So hello, everyone. We're really glad to have you here. Welcome. Welcome. So glad you're here. My name is Lori Sloan. I'm going to be your presenter today, and we're going to be talking about one of my favorite things, communication. My mom told me I was born talking, so I guess this is the right thing for me to discuss. A little bit about me. I have 18 years teaching experience, 13 at a middle school, and I think that probably counts as double, so that would be like 26 regular years. I've worked with NCVirtual 6 years now. I work in the visual arts department, which is a lot of fun. I teach AP art history right now and the art of fashion. I'm also an instructional leader with NCVirtual, and I've been doing that job for a couple years now. And then, just because teachers often get bored, right? I have to work another job, and that would be with the community college, and I'm an adjunct history instructor there. So I've had to deal with lots of different students, which I enjoy doing. I have taught many different ages in a variety of venues. So I hope to pass along some of what I learned about communicating in an online environment with you today. And my goal is that you will have at least one good takeaway from the webinar. And it would be great if you had more, but at least one good takeaway from this webinar that you can use that might make your life a little bit easier. And you're probably already noticing the one advantage of online teaching, and that's that you can attend these webinars and do some of your live classes sitting there in your robes, your PJs, your glasses with bad hair. Just know if you're doing that right now, you are my people. Okay, so student performance and teacher involvement. I know I'm preaching to the choir. We don't have to tell you that there's a direct connection there. The more we communicate and connect with our students, and I would even add the parents in there as well, the higher that grade is going to go. So that's why what we're going to talk about today is going to be so important. One other thing I do need to mention before I get going too far is the full disclosure here. Let me just put my disclaimer in here that I'll be chatting about various products and systems in this discussion, and I need to be clear that NCVirtual does not promote or endorse any of these products or services. All right, there's my little legality thing in there to make sure I got it. Okay, now, so let's talk about one of the main things that a lot of you are doing right now. I've been talking to a lot of face-to-face teachers, and it looks a little different across the state. But most folks are doing daily classes or sometimes weekly classes. So I know that you're already getting into these live classes, but it's a little different and probably a little awkward. So let me show you how to take those live classes to another level and really use those to help communicate with your students. First off, I do weekly live classes with my AP Art History students. And right now I'm doing, 2 classes a week with my college kids. And one of the first things I do, especially with my high schoolers, is invite the parents. And I know you're going, yeah, well, I don't know about that one, but let me promise you that as you invite the parents, it's going to help you so much, because what's going to happen is it's going to cut down on the questions you get from the parents. It's going to make them feel more involved. And the more involved they are, the easier your job's going to be. So it's a great idea to make them aware of the class times. Hopefully they'll be sure to remind the students as well. It better equips them to help the students at home too, because they're just sort of thrust into this homeschooling situation, which sometimes can be kind of tough. I think we all know that, right? So I invite my parents to live classes, and it's going very well, but I do have to tell you, I meet them sometimes when we meet up for a field trip at the museum in Raleigh. And I will find out that I have taught AP Art History to a small bus of lacrosse players and several families that were traveling for Christmas break that were listening to me in the car, much to the chagrin of the younger members of that family, I'm sure. So do invite the parents. I think it will help you out a lot. Come to class, as you're doing your live sessions, one of the things you might want to consider, and I know some of you won't be able to do this because you're probably logging in and out of classes all day and you're getting bombarded with the schedule that you've been given to try to get through. But if you can get to the class a few minutes early, that really helps, even if it's just 5 to 10 minutes early. One of the things I do is I'll go into my live class about 20 minutes early, and I'll hang out and talk to my early birds. And there'll be about, I'd say roughly 8 to 10 students that will come in a little bit early. And then as time rolls on and they realize that I'm going to do that every week, I'll have more and more show up. And what we'll do is I will leave their, I will mute them as they come in, so you don't get all that background noise, because there's a lot of crazy going on in houses right now. And we will chat for just a little while about what's going on with them. It's kind of like the way we would connect if we saw each other in the face-to-face world. So it's a good time for me to chat in a smaller group. Sometimes they feel a little more comfortable. They'll talk about what's going on. They'll tell me what issues they're having with the class. And it's just another really good way to connect with your students. Okay, record those classes. I'm sure a bunch of you are already doing this, but not everyone can get to the live class. We have no idea what's going on in the house right now, so we need to be flexible. Students will still feel more connected with you if they hear your voice in that recording. I have a lot of students who will send me an email right after the recording or a message and say, I thought this part was funny. And sometimes I know they're going to listen, so I'll give them a little shout out in there. But it really is good for them to hear your voice. And a recording will allow you to meet it'll allow you to reach just a few more students than you might if you were just doing the live class at a time when only, certain ones can come. And I know we're supposed to be on a set schedule, but let's be honest, we got high schoolers and they're not out of bed at 7:30. All right, what else we got here? Here's this is the first slide of the live class that I gave this week. And what I try to do is sort of set the tone as I go into my live class. I want them to be positive. I want them to be upbeat and engaging. And so what I'll do is I'll often put something funny or maybe a really good student celebration on that first slide. And then that way I kind of have them looking at something as they come in the room. Now you might notice too, up at the top, it says cue the music. Sometimes if we have music that relates to some of the stuff that we're talking about, either in history, I've done it in history with different songs from, say, like the Vietnam era. With this one, I had a piece of artwork in there from Andy Warhol, and it was the Maryland Diptych. And what I did is I put in a song by Elton John, and they had the song playing when they came in. So they sort of file in, and it starts the conversation. We start talking about why that song's playing, and they love to try to figure out, how the music relates to what we're going to talk about today. But the one thing I use is my tagline. I'll have them come in, and the first thing I'll do is say, tell me something good. And they'll, at first, they'll come in the classroom. And when I first started doing this, the kids will come in and they're like, what are you talking about? Tell you something good. And I said, all right, let me, and I've kind of expanded on it for them. And hang on a minute, I'll get to that in just a second. Let me show you the American Gothic, Grant Wood. Let me show you that first, and we'll jump in and tell me something good. Okay, so there was your American Gothic from 1930? And here's the American Gothic from 2020. Little humor goes a long way. Might be too soon for that one though. Okay, so tell me something good. Sometimes I'll get them started and I'll say, especially in the beginning, and I'll say, all right, this morning I got up at the crack of dawn. I woke up, I got my coffee, I went outside and I watched the beautiful sunrise, and it was so quiet and peaceful. Finally had a chance to curl up with a good book, whatever it is. I might tell them a lot of mine revolves around food and coffee. So we might talk about, I got to have we had a big party this weekend, and I got to make, a really great chocolate cake. I'm addicted to chocolate. And then we'll start talking, and they'll start filling in the chat about something good that happened to them this week. And let me tell you, they get in the habit of doing this. And then if I start the class and I don't say, tell me something good, they're going to like, Miss Sloan, wait, you missed all of my tell me something good stuff. And then if they miss class, they'll message me and say, Miss Sloan, I had to tell me something good. I wanted to tell you something good. And then if I see them at the museum, I'll have this group of kids come up to me and say, Miss Sloan, tell me something good. So it's a fun way to start on a positive note. I do it because it gives me a way to start talking to them, and I want them to be in a really good mood. You're kind of setting the tone for the rest of the class. And you know as well as I do, if you walk in that classroom in a face-to-face environment and you're a big old bear that day, you're going to get that reflected back to you. And it works the opposite way, thank goodness. Because if you walk in that online classroom and you're in a great mood, then they're going to reflect that back as well. You can hear a smile. I can't remember who told me that, but I think it was one of my friends that was working in telesales, right? We all hate the telemarketers. But I remember them telling me you could hear a smile, and that's kind of true, isn't it? You can hear the smile. You can feel their energy, and it's contagious. It'll wear off on those kids. And you know what? We're all stressed out right now. We need a little distraction, and that live class can be just that for you and for them. So let's, try to start it out on a positive tone, try to really bring that energy, and I promise you it pays off in spades. Celebrate the students every chance you get. I have to tell you, this is one of my themes. I love to, I'll talk to them about just about everything that's going on. But if a student tells me, lately we've been talking a lot about, how we deal with stress. And one of the students will say, Miss Sloan, I did this painting and I wanted to show it to you. And so they'll send it to me in an email or whatever. And they'll say, here's this painting. And I'm like, oh, this is wonderful. We'll start talking about, why did you paint this? Where did it come from? Why are you painting this subject? And it opens up a dialogue. And then I'll often say, hey, can I share this with live class? And some of these are just so fantastic. It's unbelievable what these kids can do. They're so talented. And so they'll be like, yeah, sure. Most of the time they'll say yes, but you always have to ask permission, because there's a few folks who are like, no, don't you be bragging on me in front of everybody. But most folks are all for it, and they'll love it when you bring it up in class. And so if I don't have a joke on that first slide, I'm going to have a celebration. Again, I'm trying to set that tone right from the very get-go. The other thing I often do is I'm doing live classes, and I do this with high schoolers. I do it with college kids. And I'll send out a survey. I'll use a form in Google, and I'll say, look, I want your input. I want to make these the best I can. I believe that we can get better every time we do these. And so how can you help me do that? And so I'll send out a survey, and I'll say, tell me what worked. Tell me what I can improve on, or we can improve on. What can we do to make this more interesting, more engaging? Just, give me your suggestions, and believe me, they will. And most of them are completely legitimate. You're like, believe that, right? They'll send you some great ideas. The kids have wonderful ideas. And so then you have buy-in, because if I start incorporating those ideas that they send me, and boy, those kids love that, right? It's total buy-in. They look at that and they go, oh my gosh, she's doing it. That was my suggestion. And then I get the added benefit of every time I teach these classes, they get a little bit better. Each year they're getting a little bit better, they're gathering steam, and we're improving things that, I would never have thought about on my own. So do a little bit of those customer surveys, as I call them. Now, this is something the kids dubbed, you can tell by the title, the after party, right? So what we do here is after class, I always tell kids there's some really in-depth questions. And I'm going, guys, hang on a second. We got to really delve into that one. And it's going to take too much time. I won't get through the material. But if you want to hang around after class, we'll go into those questions a little bit deeper. And anybody that's interested in hanging out just to listen to the questions we talk about, that's fine too. And usually I'll have anywhere between 35 and 50 in a APR history class each week. And probably 10 to 20 will hang out for the after party. Now, this was dubbed this by the last year's class. This year doesn't really call it that anymore, but we still hang out a little bit after the live class. And then that's the time I open the mic. That's the time that if I'm brave and I'm not looking too scary that day, there aren't a lot of those, I'm just gonna be honest. My live class takes place between 8:30 and 9:30. Y'all, nope, I'm not opening that video. But they might open the video, we'll chat. And we'll chat about, they might love a particular artist, or they just saw this artwork that we were talking about in the museum, or they're going on a trip and they hope to see this piece. The whole point is we're developing this sense of a learning community, and we hang out, we talk about art, we talk about some of the stress that's going on in their lives, but it's only like 15, 20 minutes. But it's a really nice kind of connection in an online environment where sometimes that's a little bit difficult. Email works. Email is another way that you can reach them. After that was, about live class, and now we're kind of switching gears and looking at email. And email is great. It's the old standby, right? It works, but it's rarely a standalone. I almost never send things just by email. I will usually message students in a variety of ways. So you have a lot of these tools, and some of you are using Canvas, some of you are using Google Classroom. But both of those have messaging systems, and they're fantastic. But you can combine a messaging system with email and get twice the punch. You can reach more folks that way. Some kids will never look at an email. Some kids will never look at the message, the Canvas inbox. So, maybe you got one or the other. You got twice the shot of getting a hold of them. Remind is really popular right now. The only thing I would say is just be kind of mindful of how you're using those, because sometimes the tone that comes across isn't the tone you intended. You might be able to hear a smile, but you can't tell if somebody's smiling when they're writing, usually, unless they got emojis all over the place. And usually then you're going to get made fun of. So be mindful of the tone you're doing in your writing. It's a good idea to get in a really good mood before you send some of those emails out. Here's a sample scenario, and I'll share this with you because this is how my life works on a regular basis. Okay, so you want to write emails that will evoke a response. And I've learned over the years that some emails I send out are perfectly professional. They're good emails, but they don't get any responses. People ignore them. Parents ignore them. Kids ignore them. And it's the same with messages. Sometimes I'll send a message out to a child and I'll not get anything back. So I've developed a little bit of a method over time on how to get a response. So here's a scenario, and I'm sorry, it's a lot of words, right? You have a student that's done very little work. They had 6 assignments due over the last 2 weeks, and they only managed to turn in 2, and even those were late. This sounds familiar, right? It's been a struggle all semester to get work from that child, but you continue to try. It's just what we do. You sent reminds for each assignment and messaged them a few days ago, but have got no response. So you decide to send an email to the student to help spur them along. This is the email you want to write, right? Had trouble. Your grade is dropping like my IQ after watching 3 episodes of The Tiger King. You've got to get that work in to pass my class. Turning in 1 assignment a week is just not going to cut it. Time is running out, and so is my patience. I better see some work from you soon, or your mom and I are going to have a nice long chat. We may be quarantined, but that won't stop me from coming to your house. So that's what you want to send. This is what you ultimately send if you want to keep your job. Hi, sunshine. I just wanted to touch base with you. I see that you've been turning in some late assignments this past week. Bravo. Keep that work coming in. You do have quite a ways to go in order to get that grade up to where it needs to be, but I know you can do it. If you could double down on the modules each week, you should be able to make that happen. Please see the attached pacing guide that will help you get back on track. Let me know if you have any questions on this or if I can help you in any way. Remember, I'm just an email, message, or phone call away. I would love to hear from you. Please check in with me when you get a chance. I miss seeing you in live class. Have a great day, Miss Sloan. Now, you had a grandma like mine. I had 2 wonderful grandmas. God love them. They would always tell me you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, right? I know you've heard it. It's easy to find the faults. Anybody can do that. But to make them want to work, you got to find the one thing they're doing right and point it out. And it's super important in an online environment because I'm telling you, this works. I've tried it. I've been professional and polite. But if I point out the one thing they're doing right, and I really kind of expand on that, just acknowledge it and tell them, yeah, that was it. Bravo. Let's keep that going. It works. They love that. They'll get back to me. Then let them know you still believe in them. Let them know that you still have their back, even though they might be jumping on that one nerve that you got left. You're still there for them. They're still your kid. So it's good for them to know that, especially now. Everything's just topsy-turvy and they're at home going crazy. So it's a good idea to get that part in there as well. It might be a mountain and you might be looking at it going, there is no way this child is going to get all this done. But never say never, because you know what? I have had some kids really kicking in maybe the last month of the semester, and I hate when they do that, but they still can get it done. And you got to keep trying to work with them, and you'd be surprised. Sometimes they'll pull it out. One thing you want to do though is give them a plan for how to achieve the goal. And that's what I did in that last email. I said, let's double down on those modules. In addition to that, I'm going to send them a pacing guide. Pacing guides work wonders. They are your friend. And sometimes with high schoolers, they just don't even know where to start. So they just give up before they even dive in. A pacing guide can really help, and it takes it another step further than, say, a checklist. Pacing guide might be a daily pacing guide if they're really struggling. Weekly pacing guide is usually what I use, but if I've got kids that just can't get it together, then I'll do a daily pacing guide just for that class, and it helps tremendously. I've had a lot of good feedback from students and parents on that one. And then lastly, in that last one, I told them, this is how you get in touch with me, remember? Not that they didn't know, but just reminding them. How often do you reach out? I'll tell you what I do. I'm a kind of a creature of habit, and if I don't do it this way, I forget. So what I do is I pick one day a week to go through my grade book and see who needs a contact. And what I'm looking for is, I'm looking to see if they've logged in lately. With you guys, if they're not coming to your live class, say it's 7:30 in the morning and it's high school and they're still in bed, then that's a kid you need to reach out to. So you send I call them the just checking in message. I might send it in message, I might send it in email, I might try to call and just remind them that, how they can get in touch with me and can I help? I see you haven't signed in lately. Is there anything I can do to help? And then I record that contact so I know who I've touched base with, but I use kind of my grade book as the guide. Doesn't mean I don't touch base with the good kids either. I love touching base with them. Those are fun. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, I guess it's time for a quick question check.
Okay, so we do have a trending topic around recording. We had a lot of activity in the chat about recording classes, and some folks are not allowed to record their classes, and we just want to remind you all to rely on your district's policy on that. We had some other questions. Lori, do you have a lot of parents show up? I think it was one of your first slides where you would
I actually do. Y'all, I've made some great contacts with parents. I had just recently, I was just talking to her, which is kind of crazy. She just texted me and told me she had to cancel a trip, because of this whole Corona crazy thing going on. But what I did is I told the parents that just like I do every semester or the beginning of every year, you are welcome to attend. Please come. And they showed up. And sometimes the students are like, Mom, don't tell them who you really are. And then I promise not to out them. And then the mom comes in just with her first name. But I have had several parents come in. And then actually the last two that came to the classes was last year. One of them was a doctor who traveled a lot. And she would often jump in. And I would say, I know you've been here. Could you tell me your take on it? She would jump in. The kids loved her. She was really funny. The other one, it was one of my students' father. He was from Africa, and he was talking about the mask that we were looking at. He also taught at the college. So he would jump in. Actually, we had him do a little spiel about that artwork. So yes, you do have parents take you up on it. The other thing, just Tuesday, we had a class just Tuesday in AP Art History. And there was something in there about one of the artists was from Cuba, and it said that they practice Santeria, and so one of the students is typing in there going, "My mom's singing that song," and I think I sang this. I did a line from the song too, and she goes, "My mom's singing with you. Here she's on here too," and Mom starts typing. So, if you open it up to it, I promise you, a few of them will show up.
Okay. We also had someone ask, do you have any advice for overwhelmed students that are feeling like the workload's too heavy, or students who aren't motivated to complete ungraded work?
Well, the first thing I typically do is connect, right? So one of the things I want to know is, how are you dealing with the stress? And if they say, I don't know, then that means they're not, right? So one of the things I'll talk to them about is, this is what I do. I'll have that 2 o'clock cup of coffee, right? I'll take 10 minutes to meditate, and I'll read a book for a half hour just to go someplace else. And then, I'll start to chat with them and say, what do you like to do? Some of them it's video games, and you know what? That's okay if it's not overdone. It gives them an outlet. Some of them will say, I really like to take, photographs. And so what I might do is encourage them to show me sort of evidence of them going out there and doing their, whatever it is they do to de-stress, so that it reminds them to do it, So a lot of times I'll connect first, and then I'll transition into, okay, let's work together. How much time? Let me tell you, tell me a little bit about your schedule each week right now. How are things looking? And I'm just asking for generals, right? Tell me what's going on in your life right now. How has your routine changed? And once they tell me that, then we might sit down and say, okay, so you have this time in the evening, it looks like. So what about, you do a half hour AP Art History from 7 to 7:30. You give me that half hour. And I promise you too, during that half hour you're working, I'm around. So if you want to dig in that half hour, then let's go ahead and set up a little pacing guide. Even if it's just a half hour, we can knock out some of this. We can chip away at this mountain, right? And then I try to get them to focus on one little bite-sized thing at a time, because they're overwhelmed, because they're going, oh my gosh, I'm 10 modules behind. I can't do it. I said, no. We're not going to think about the 10 modules, right? We're going to think about this assignment. Let's do this assignment. Then let's do the next assignment, but just one thing at a time seems to really help a lot. It helps me anyway.
And Lori, we've had a couple of people ask for examples of the customer surveys and also the pacing guide you use.
Yeah, I'd be glad to share those. I can put those in, I'll put them in the resources. I think we got some resources going that Melissa has been putting together. I would be real glad to share those. And we can talk about that more too in the Q&A sessions as well. I'm happy to share anything I have.
Okay, and also we've got quite a few questions on, does this webinar pertain to younger students? And how would you engage younger students who can't read or express thoughts in writing?
Yeah, I think that is tough. I think it's tough when, when you do have a student that can't, maybe tell you as much. Like I do deal with the older crowd. I'm not going to lie there. But I think if I had younger students, one of the things I've always done with my own kids, and even when I've had my limited experience with younger ones, is I did like to have them draw things. And again, that's partly because I'm an art person. But I would often have them, draw a picture to kind of communicate what's going on, and that can tell you volumes. But I think too, that's one where you really want to see what's going on with the parent, and see what's going on at home, and see how you can help out that way. I believe that's the way I would address that. I think I would want to really open up the lines of communication with those parents, because I think there's an awful lot you can do to get them to help you.
Okay, I think that's it for now. We did have, how do you motivate parents? And then again, also, how do teachers handle it when they're not allowed to grade assigned work right now?
Yeah, that's going to be a challenge, isn't it? I guess we're going to figure that one out together. Well, but we're still grading, but it's changing, right? We're in a different scenario. We're just going to have to kind of feel that out as we're going with what's going on in the world right now. But when you're not allowed to grade, even if it's not Corona crazy, yeah, then it's all about, I think the connections then become even more important. So that's tough.
Okay, well, if we want to move on, I'll dig back in the chat for our next Q&A session and start to note some of the questions that we're getting.
We're going to get into the parents a little bit more here soon, so that should help with that one, I think, a little bit as well. So let's see what we got coming up next. Let me show you this one. I wanted to show you about announcements, because I know a lot of us use announcements since we're online right now. That's one great way to communicate. A lot of us are using them in Canvas or Google Classroom, and those announcements can be really, really helpful. There's a couple tricks though of the trade that some folks, like I didn't know about it right away. These are things I had to learn as I went. But what I did do was, there's this wonderful setting, in Canvas. And if you go under, let me see, there it is. I was missing my little notes there. But if you go under the settings slide, the settings on your homepage, and you I had my little list here. Hang on a second. I might have missed it. Oh, there it is. Okay, so you go under your settings on your homepage, you go under course details and then more options, and then you get this screen, and that's the fewer options at the top. And then what you're doing is you can set it so that you can put announcements, the first 3, I usually choose 3, and I put them on the front of my homepage so they're like in your face and you can see them. I think that's pretty helpful. And then, it's just a neat little thing to use. Don't forget to hit update though if you do it that way. And then with Google Classroom, you can just be sending those announcements out. There's not really a way to escalate those. I'm not sure that you can make those stand out a little more in that venue. But it does help to get them to somehow read announcements. And I use like a whole bunch of tools, whatever I have at my disposal to get them to check those out. A lot of times I'll hide extra credit in there, and it'll show up every once in a while, but not every day. And I think that they get into the habit of looking for it. But the main thing I do is I set regular days for announcements, and I let them and the parents know that there's going to be an announcement in AP Art History on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays of every week. And so they know that they're kind of trained to look at the announcements on those days. So say like on Tuesday, they know they're going to get a whole big ton of information about the class and what we're doing in that module and what's happening that week. Thursday, they're going to do something called Throwback Thursday, which I'll share with you in a second. And then Friday, they're going to get some feedback on that. So let me show you a little bit about that. That's what the top of Canvas looks like, by the way. Some of you probably already do this, but it was something that I was I feel like I was the last person to figure that out. Okay, I use some tricks in the announcements, and this should work for really any LMS you're using. But one of the things I do is I use terms that they're familiar with, like Throwback Thursday. And so on Throwback Thursday, they know when they sign in that we're going to do some review work. We're going to have some multiple choice questions in there that will review the material that they've studied way back in AP Art History. And then they can go through and answer those questions. And I usually offer some extra credit for it. Not a lot, but enough to motivate them to want to check it out. And it's a really excellent review. And so what they'll do is sometimes it's just 3 questions. And they'll go through and send me the answers, just message me the answers and say, here you go, here's my Throwback Thursday. In fact, right now, I've been seeing them come in all morning because I have one posted. So they'll answer those questions. Now, it's not just take the multiple choice questions and answer them. What I'm doing is, as they send them to me, I'm sending them back and saying, this one's right, this one isn't. And it's a teachable moment. You missed this one, but let me show you. And what I'll have is, several responses kind of already typed out, and I'll send them to them and say, this is what you missed on this one, but let me remind you what that one was about. And then on Friday, I'll post them again for folks who might not have participated in Throwback Thursday, but on Friday, they're looking at them going, you know what? I do remember those questions, and it'll have in-depth kind of explanations about what each one was, especially if it wasn't obvious. So they kind of like that. They also like this, Message Me Mondays. I will often have them do that just because it's something that we can connect with. No, it's not educational, but yes, that is okay. What we're doing is trying to get them to talk. This was this week's, right? I said, here's just a fun, crazy one. What's the most ridiculous fact you know? And I had a kid send it back, right away. She responds and she says, Miss Sloan, the most ridiculous fact I know is that you can't hold your nose and hum at the same time. And I had to try it, right? So we started talking, and we were talking about useless trivia and things that we knew. And it went into this whole other conversation with her. And so I got to kind of know her a little bit better. She's one that has never talked to me before, but she sent me the most ridiculous fact, right? Go figure. So anyway, it's kind of a fun way to connect with them. And that's just to connect, just to get them to talk. Once you get them talking, you can usually get them to start working in the class as well. Checklist. I often use checklists in the announcements. I use them in emails. I use them everywhere, trying to get my kids on track. So I'll say, look, here's our checklist. This is what you have to get done for this week. And it often happens, it often helps if you rank those according to what you want done first, because they usually start at the top. And this is what it looks like just in my AP Art History classroom announcement. It just gives them a chance to, see what they have to do that week. And then the other thing I do are the daily pacing guides, which work really well. And if you have younger students, these are things that could be communicated to the parent, because whether they like it or not, they're homeschooling a little bit, right? So some of these things might help them not feel so overwhelmed, because I know a bunch of those folks are going, I don't have any idea what I'm doing. And they're going to appreciate you all so much when this is over. But anyway, this is what I break down for my AP Art History students. They're great students, but this works in any class I've ever taught. I've done a weekly pacing guide, and the kids are like, and this was actually one of their suggestions. It came out of one of the student surveys. They were like, and that was a survey for just the course in general. And they were like, this would help me so much. And so that's what I did. We do a pacing guide. And then the other thing I use the announcements for, especially if you're having trouble getting the kids to log in at the time that your live class is, I use them to sort of help them with the trouble spots. And again, with the younger folks, this is really going to help the parents, because if they log into your announcement and they're looking in there, or if you can communicate this to them, however, you use to talk to your parents, and I'll talk about that in a second too, because a newsletter works really well for that. But if you're telling them, look, this is where I know our kids are going to have issues. These are the stumbling blocks coming down the road. And here's some really good resources to help you do that. They'll love you for it. The kids will love you for it, and the parents will love you for it. This is an example of that in my Art of Fashion course. Drawing bodies is really difficult. So what I did is I put in, this is just a portion of what I put in the announcement. And I said, look, guys, there's fashion templates. They're out there. They're free. You can use them. So here's something that will help you from getting frustrated over, drawing these bodies, because I'm with you. Those are tough. And so they love that. That was a stumbling block, and we put that in the announcements, and it was very, the kids loved it, very well received. I've also done office hours more frequently now than I've ever done. I always have office hours, but now what I'm doing is I'm saying, look, if you're really having a tough time, and this could work with the younger crowd as well, if you're having a tough time and you want to set up office hours, and you could even, like if you're not having folks, usually I just have them when I'm already online anyway working, like I'm grading or whatever, and then they can show up whenever they want to. But, you could have it by appointment, I guess, if you wanted to. But the office hours can be a lifesaver, because you can set regular times. The parents and students can know about them. The parents could pop in with the students, and you could really help those folks who are struggling and kind of focus on them a little bit. And if it needs to be super individual, then you could maybe, set up just a time that's just for them. But office hours can really be good. I know you guys are maxed out, but you wouldn't have to put aside a bunch of time. Just an hour or two would really be helpful, just for those that would take advantage of it. You might not have very many, but for those that do, you're going to see really good results that way. I've done that at least twice since we started with this whole Corona thing. And you can sometimes just have a Q&A session in office hours. Feedback is you guys are doing this in regular courses anyway, but feedback is such an important way to kind of communicate with your students. It's more than just telling them how they did on that assignment. You can always kind of dig in and really point at what they do well, and kind of build them up a little bit too. And you can really focus on them. So feedback's a great way to communicate with your students. And again, you could take this into face-to-face once this is over. I use something called, I use like a feedback bank in Google Docs. I'm sure a bunch of you probably do the same, something similar. I will show you this. This was just a sample feedback. I'm not reading the whole thing because it was on Van Gogh, but everybody loves Starry Night, right? So we can put this on here and let you just look at that and feel better, right? Van Gogh makes everybody better. But what I will do is I will often have like, I don't know, I'm a talker, so I got a lot of feedback, right? But let me break it down for you. What I'll do is I'll have a bunch, like for that Van Gogh essay that we do in art history, I'll have 9 different responses that I might use in that, for that assignment. And what I'll do is, I'll see how the kid responds, and then I'll pick one from that bank, right? I'll withdraw from that bank, one that sort of fits what he's talking about that he did touch on. And then I do another part that's individual to that student, right? And I do chat back and forth. It's crazy how many of the students will respond to the feedback, and then that becomes our chat. It's nuts, but it happens all the time. And they will come back and say, you know what? I like that website you gave me. And I'll show you. There was like, I had like, these are some of the ones that were in the bank, right? For just that project. But I'll have like websites that, are really cool that I know they'll love. And so they'll be talking back and forth to me about the feedback, which is a lot of fun as well. And it's another great way to communicate. And another really amazing tool to use with feedback is, this is called Text Expander. And you pay for it. I know, but it's only like $3 a month, which is like a Starbucks. And for me, that's a bad habit anyway. Like I can chug some Starbucks. But there's one there, the Text Expander that I use. Every teacher that I've ever gotten to use this or told about this, not gotten to use it, it doesn't matter. I'm not selling it, but I'm just saying it's a really good tool. It'll save you a lot of time as you are doing feedback, and that will work right now when you're online, or it will work when you are face-to-face if you have to do feedback and grading, because it's like a shortcut thing, and it's very inexpensive per month. But that's something that we could dig into, at a Q&A session, but it's a good tool. And there's lots of them out there. You can have a bank of questions and just keep rolling them over and over, and it makes it easier. But onward with the parents. A lot of times what I'll do initially when I want to start talking to my parents, and you can do it now, it won't matter. But what you do is send an email and talk to them about, I want to make sure that you could tell them right now, I'm updating my information. I want to see, what's your preferred method of communication? And please respond to this email and let me know. And I usually get about half of those back, which I know doesn't sound like fabulous numbers, but I'm dancing a jig when I get half of them back. But I will get back, they'll say, I want email, I want text, I want phone. And then I usually put it in a spreadsheet and color code it, right? So I know how they want to chat. But I always tell them, look, I want to work with you. I want to talk to you this semester. I want to really be involved. And I want us to be able to get a hold of each other. What's the best way I can get in touch with you? And then I just put it in a spreadsheet, which really helps me a lot. Parent Observer in Canvas is another really good tool as well, but your district has to enable it. If they have it, use it. Like if they don't, you won't be able to, but if they have it in Canvas, that's something you want to make use of, because that helps, because then the parents can be in the classroom and they can look in Canvas and they can see what's going on. And you can see who's observing and who isn't. And again, I use the call to action emails. Like I was talking about the one I did before with the students. And I do similar ones with the parents. And sometimes I'll send a student email and I'll just put all the stakeholders in there. I'll put another teacher, if they're involved with that student. I'll put the parent, I'll put the student. So we're all on the same page. And then that student's like, man, Miss Sloan. I'm like, I know, you had nowhere to hide, did you? So I just, put it out there for everybody. Sometimes I'll have a bunch of different, emails put aside that I'll send to parents. And sometimes it's, it's just your students doing really well and I'm enjoying working with them. And those I call just bragging emails. I'll get in there and talk about all the cool things that student does. And I think those are important now too, even though it's hard to find the time, I know. But parents need that now, I think. You need a win, right? So those just bragging emails are kind of fun, but I will also set up an email. Like when I send emails to the parents, what I'll do is say, very much like the way I laid it out with the student email, but I'll say, sometimes if I really want them to answer and the student's behind, I will send them a list of some of the assignments that the students missed. They see how long that list is and they're going, oh my goodness. And every one of them will send me back one then, right? They're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize he was missing that much. And then the conversation starts about, look, this is how you need to get into Canvas and look at his grades. This is how you and I need to talk every week. This is why I need to talk to you, because this list is long. Sometimes they need a visual. Sometimes that helps. I don't know. I've found it to be useful. Just be mindful of the FERPA regulations. I can't tell you how many times you get emails and, you know, you got the student's full name and a grade. You've got to be really careful with that. You don't want to do that. You want to save the grade conversations for the phone calls. But anyway, yeah, I usually track all my parent communication as well. And that is, you know, parents are so key. I know you know this. Here's one that I would really recommend right now. I've got parents right now telling me, Miss Sloan, I'm getting like 20 reminds a day. and I'm laughing going, I know, it's because your child's not working. One of the ways that you could kind of help them here is a parent newsletter. That newsletter is a lifesaver because what you do is you put all the general information in there. You put all the stuff in there that they need to know about this week. And you know, I'm not going to say they all read them, but even if you get half, you're doing something, right? You're going to look for those students, you know, you're definitely going to send emails for the students that are having issues. But if you do a parent newsletter, you can really kind of do all the general stuff and tell them all the ways that they can be involved, like what we were talking about. You can tell them, empower the parents, right? You can tell them about the announcements and where to find them. You can give them some of the information in the announcements that little Johnny doesn't ever tell them. You can tell them about how to check grades. If it's not Parent Observer, then how do they log in and find them? Where can they find the grades? And how can they get a hold of you to talk about the grades? Or when are you available? Give them the office hours. You can tell them the tips. I always put a tips and tricks section in there, right? And I'll say, look, this is what we're doing this week. I usually send these out about every week to every 2 weeks. And I'll say, this is what's coming up and this is what they're going to have trouble with. And here's some cool resources for you and for them. I give it to the students too, but I want the parents to have it as well. I pop those pacing guides in there. Parents love those. Checklist, all of those in there. And those newsletters help. And it can just be an email. I mean, you just, you know, you're copying that one over. And I think I've gotten great responses on that. They tend to really like that. And then the last thing is that I try to track all of the information that I can. I use a spreadsheet. One of the things I have a couple of friends right now that, you know, we were chatting about it online about how to keep up with, you know, all this communication. It can be kind of mind-boggling. One of the things I do is if you've got that mass communication, you're trying to remember what you sent out. I mean, I think you can find it within your messaging systems anyway, but I usually will make a line and I'll make a spreadsheet and I'll make one line that says mass communication. And I'll put that across the top. And then I make the rest of the spreadsheet about the individual communication. And that's kind of what that would look like. I do it by week. Hopefully you don't have to do it by day, but I don't know, some cases you might. Hopefully your absences are somewhere else. But I will do like, I've got a column for each week. And then when I fly through this spreadsheet, I'm looking to see if I've contacted, you know, if I've got all these contacts written down here, or I've got a color code saying I've contacted them. You can use color codes as well. It makes it faster. But if I see like a green, I know I've talked to them. And if I slide down and I'm scrolling up and down these two columns, then I'll look and say, all right, I contacted almost everybody this week. And there's a couple kids in here I didn't. So that means they've got to be contacted in this week's column. And then I keep the parents over here. And this one shows, you know, and this is just the standard kind of NCVirtual communication journal. This is the sort of thing we use. But we'll have like weeks 1 through 4. We want to make sure that parent we've had contact sometime that month, right? So we're going to look and see, you know, over the last 4 weeks, have we talked to them? And every time we talk to them, we log it. It really does help because then you know what you talked about. And again, you got to be careful though. These things still, you don't want to put too much information in a communication journal. You might just use the first name. You don't want to put a whole lot, but you can, you know, kind of leave yourself little bite-sized notes so that you know what you chatted about. Or you might just say there was an issue here, contacted parent on this date. That helps too, because it just alerts you and you go, all right, I know, you know, I know that we had to touch base on that one. And just as final comments, what I would say is don't try to conquer the world all at once. Just like I was saying with the students, you can't incorporate everything at one time. Take one thing and incorporate that. And then once you're comfortable with that, then incorporate the next idea. You're constantly growing, right? There's lots of cool ideas out there. And as teachers, we really need to be doing more of this, more of these learning communities where we can kind of chat. I love that we're having Q&A sessions, you know, after this, and you can come in and it'll be smaller groups and we can really, you know, delve in and talk and chat and brainstorm. It would be great, you know, too, like just for those folks that teach different grade levels. I'm sure you're already doing a lot of that, but you need to keep doing that. Find out what's working for other folks and use your social media and find out some great ideas, because there's some wonderful teachers in North Carolina. So this has been fun, guys. I guess we need to do some more questions, yes?
Sounds good. So thank you so much, everyone, for all your comments and suggestions you're putting in the chat. It's been super active. And we've had a lot of discussion around motivating parents, and I think you answered a lot of that in your parent communication section. You gave great tips surrounding that topic, like the parent newsletter. We did have a question on what vehicle or program you're using to create and send the newsletters. And someone said they sent through Remind. What do you use?
Well, and you know, I've used S'more for you. I love it because I'm an art teacher and it's artsy. I've used S'more, but I only use the free version because I'm cheap, right? And I think they have a new deal going right now, so I have to look, you know. So I know S'more is limited. I use that whenever I can, but you know how they limit you a little bit on the free version. And when I don't, when I'm broke, I use email. But you know, I will often just, something as silly as just doing the email and kind of messing with the size of the text and making it like the topics a little bit larger can help them sort it out. I just try to make sure that when I'm sending a newsletter in email, that it's a little easier to read, not just this big blurb of text. So, but I use S'more when I can. And you guys probably have some great ideas as well. I know there's a ton out there that I have not thought about.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we also had a lot of activity around non-English speaking parents, and a lot of our participants had some comments on using Google Translate.
Mm.
Have you ever used that?
I have not. You know, my first degree forever ago was Spanish. That has been really helpful. It's broken, it's ugly, but it works, right? The other thing I've done is I make friends with all the language teachers in NCVirtual. We have language teachers in just about every kind of a language. So if you have a language teacher at your school, or you know someone that you know speaks it, I've often used them. Like I said, I can do broken. I have not done Google Translate, but that's something that we could ask. I know we have a wonderful language teacher that's doing, Alexa is doing some Q&A. She was one of the speakers. She'll be doing a Q&A session. She will tell you all kinds of stuff about that too. She has lots of information on that, I would think, because she's the expert as far as languages go. And she's a wonderful teacher. She might be able to help there.
Okay, and also on inviting parents to the classroom, there was some technical questions about using Google Classroom and Canvas, and I want to just remind everyone that we have sessions, post sessions and archive, or sessions to come, and also archive recordings of sessions that have to do with Canvas and Google Classrooms on our digital transition page, and I'm just going to put that in the chat. We did have a request that could you share your communication log template?
Yes, ma'am. Sure can. I'll put that with the resources in Melissa's document as well. So I'll mark these down somewhere. When we listen to the recording, I'll make a list and we'll put them in the resources. I'll look for anything I used in here and we'll put them in there.
And I will send you what I have noted also. So then people were mentioning a reward system for students who might be doing work right now when it's not technically required, and some people had some suggestions for virtual prizes. Do you do any of that?
Oh, you know, there are some, I have not done that, but I have talked with teachers who will do that because they have like, gosh, what are those called? Like they're little stickers or little medals you can earn. And I think those are kind of cool. I think that would be a great idea. Again, too, I celebrate those students that are working, and we show off all the work they're doing if there's something that I can show off. But I have seen folks do that, but I have not done the little, I know there's ways to do that out there. I'm just not the person on that one. I haven't done it yet. That's one of the things I need to try.
Oh, we just had a question come in to ask if you're on Twitter or Instagram.
Yeah, I am. I don't remember my Twitter handle. Isn't that awful? That's awful. I will put that in the resources if you want me to, or I can, hang on, I bet I can find it. Let me see. You know, my son would be mortified right now. I have let me see if I can get it for you real quick. I bet I can. Here I go. Oh, look at that. Let's see if there it is. Okay, it's at L Sloan NCVPS. Want me to type it in?
Sure, that sounds great. The resources will be located on our digital transition page. Give us a couple days to put the recordings, and then yeah, and thank you, Gitanjali. We'll be emailing out certificates that can be applied towards CEUs in about a week. I think lastly, and you may have answered this with your text expander, an easy way to grade so you aren't grading or giving feedback every time someone posts.
I know, doesn't that bog you? It bogs you down a little bit. The feedback bank is really helpful, and text expand, y'all, that thing, I know. I don't want to sound like an ad for text expander, but Taryn Odom turned me on to that. She was one of our teacher of the years, and I was like, you know what? I think this is crazy, but I'm gonna try it. And it was really awesome how much time it saves you. And it's not just like for feedback. You could use it for a lot of things. But most people will have like a Google Doc, and they'll do, for each assignment, they'll have a bunch of different, we call them canned responses. It's just important not to do just canned responses. You want to make sure that you're individualizing those. And you can do that. You could start with a canned response and then mix it up and make it about that person. But usually that's what a lot of the teachers here do. We'll do a Google Doc, and we'll have a bunch of those responses in there. Text expander is a great way. I'm sure there's some other fantastic ones. I shamelessly steal any idea I get there, but those are the two that I have used.
Well, we just had a question come in on feedback bank. Could you clarify, is that a tool or is that something you create?
No, that was just my jargon. I'm sorry. I'm like, I just call it my feedback bank, right? I have that's what I meant by the documents, right? Like if you were doing Google Docs, you'd have for that assignment, I have the whole bank of answers that I can draw from, right? And then my text expander, since I've been using it a couple years, that thing is slam full. I've got so many cool responses in there, and it's so easy because I go through and go, oh, I haven't talked about this one. That's so cool. Let's put that in there. We were chatting about that in live class. And then each year you get a little better. I add to them every year. So whatever your feedback is, you want to keep growing it and adding to it. You don't want it to be stagnant, right? So you just keep adding some ideas to it every year.
Okay, I think we have 1 minute left and we have just enough time. Lab facilitators, what's the best way that they can help support the efforts?
You know what? On my, if you guys go on my Twitter, some of the coolest people across the state that I've had some contact with was through DPI. I was an ambassador for them one summer, and that was the coolest thing. These CTE teachers are on there. So if you look at the folks that I'm following, and you kind of find some of those CTE teachers, those people are, I guess they would be like your lab folks. I think that's kind of what you mean. But those folks exchange so much information. I think really what you want to do is use those lab people to bounce ideas off, because you are going to get back so much feedback from them, because they're going to know about different things that you don't know. So I would use them for feedback and kind of collaborate with them when you can, even if it's just a few minutes.
Okay, well, we're at 2 o'clock.
All right. Well, that has been fun. Thank you for the distraction, my fellow teachers. This was wonderful, and I have enjoyed it immensely. I hope that you got something from it, even if it's just one little nugget to take with you. So thank you so much for coming.